Hi, everyone. I'm Heidi Lobbs, Leadership and Coaching Technical Assistance Coordinator at the Wisconsin RTI Center.
And I'm Dan Seaman. I'm an Academic Regional Technical Assistance Coordinator, also with the Wisconsin RTI Center.
And I'm Michelle Ring-Hansen, Assessment and Data Specialist at CISA 7. Welcome to our session, Building the Parachute After the Jump, using remote learning data to inform decision-making for continuity of learning. This session is designed to help educators identify and leverage data from the transition to remote learning in spring of 2020 in order to support district, school, and classroom level planning for the 2021 school year.
This graphic represents the Equitable Multi-Level System of Supports framework that was developed by the Wisconsin RTI Center in conjunction with the DPI. It consists of 11 key system features that help schools and districts create enduring, efficient systems for all students academically, behaviorally, socially, and emotionally. This session will be focused on the system feature, strategic use of data, how it is used through collaboration to inform high-quality instruction. These key system features inform and impact each other. Therefore, the success of the framework depends on a school or district's capacity to simultaneously develop key system features. Equity is at the heart of the Wisconsin framework. You will see equity embedded throughout this session and other sessions. Watch for this symbol. One of our research briefs at the center is 5 factors that facilitate sustained implementation of an equitable multi-level system of support in Wisconsin, and it's available at the center's website. This session will highlight one of those factors. Teams regularly use data to plan and make changes. Our session will help educators use other sources of data in the absence of state and local assessments during the remote learning of last school year. Our outcomes for this session are participants and teams will consider the implications of data use in the current learning environment. Participants will also identify available data sources from the remote learning environment that can be used to inform decision-making. Participants and teams will also identify additional data sources necessary to support student learning needs going forward. Also, this session will be directly connected to the items from the Tiered Fidelity Inventory and the School-Wide Implementation Review that you see on the screen. Strategic use of data is defined as an ongoing, reflective, and collaborative analysis of implementation and outcomes data in a problem-solving process to inform improvement and achieve equity. Some of the defining elements of this key feature say that teams use implementation data to gauge the extent practices are in place and used as intended and guide action planning. Additionally, teams use multiple forms of aggregated and disaggregated student outcome data to identify the effectiveness of system of supports for learners and families and who is benefiting from and whose needs are underserved by the system. Given the current educational landscape with a shift to remote learning due to the COVID-19 pandemic, school and district leaders are facing a new school year without the benefit of their traditional student-level data that they have been able to rely on in the past. In this session, we will walk you through practical strategies and data sources that can help prepare your teams to inform instructional decision-making and what supports learners need moving forward. This document, which is also in your handouts, is a joint effort of the U.S. Department of Education grant programs. They created guidance for states, districts, and schools to return to school for the 2020-2021 school year. This guide describes the use of a multi-tiered system of support, like Wisconsin's Equitable Multi-Level System of Support, to restart classroom and schools in a manner that all students, families, and educators are supported effectively efficiently, and relevantly. The use of data is one of the 5 guiding principles of this document. In the document, it details that data are used to inform decisions about which families, students, and educators need support through screening, continuing to adjust or fade supports for students, families, and educators through the progress monitoring, ensuring that all students, families, and educators experience benefit from the district's multi-level system of support focused on equitable outcomes and supports that are being implemented with fidelity.
Let's take a closer look at the implications of data use in our current learning environment. In looking ahead to the 2020-2021 school year, there are 3 points to consider. First, we can't rely on the traditional data sources we have previously used to drive continuous improvement and planning. This doesn't mean that we pause our continuous improvement efforts, but rather we identify alternative sources of data that can inform our work. Second, local district screening data will be more important than ever to assess current levels of student learning and identify instructional starting points. It is critical that educators use consistent screening processes to determine student learning needs. And third, it will be really important to obtain current data on students' social and emotional learning to help them manage their emotions and navigate a changing educational environment. Collecting social and emotional learning data will help teachers and other educators answer the question, what do I need to know to help students feel comfortable and ready to learn? Let's dig a bit deeper into continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is an ongoing data-driven process in which learning organizations deliberately and strategically collaborate to understand and replicate successes and plan for and address areas of concern. So how do we plan for continuous improvement in the 2021 school year? With districts shifting to remote learning and the pause in state testing, educators don't have access to the same data they typically did when planning for a new school year. However, there are other sources of data to help inform improvement efforts. As you plan for the 2021 school year, it is likely that you may feel more in the dark about overall student achievement and the effectiveness of educational programming. In previous years, we've had a collection of data sources to inform our improvement work. State assessments, our local spring assessments, system assessments such as the SIR and TFI, discipline data for the year, attendance data for the entire year, and those all-important informal observations of students while learning in the classroom. It's critical to remember that data has not gone away, but has in most cases changed. There are some very rich data sources from remote learning that we can collect, analyze, learn from, and use to inform decision-making. For example, we now have evidence of learning from student work completed during our remote learning journey. Student remote learning participation and engagement data, information about curriculum and instruction provided while in remote learning, student, teacher, family remote learning surveys, and attendance and discipline data up until March and possibly through the remote learning timeframe. All of these data sources can provide valuable information as you plan for improving teaching and learning in the 2020-2021 school year. Another valuable and essential piece of information to inform teaching and learning is data from universal screening. The universal screening process uses brief assessments to identify students who are and who are not meeting grade level expectations. When administering universal screening in the fall, it is important to use assessments that are closely connected to the curriculum and provide information to help students access priority grade level work. To identify what experiences will be necessary for a student to be ready to learn on grade level with their peers. And please remember, these assessments are not to be used to hold a student back from grade level learning.
Families and students themselves will be able to provide educators with important and valuable data about academic, social, and emotional learning. It's likely that students' social and emotional learning will be a very high priority as the new school year begins. 5 months of uncertainty, stress, and isolation may have significantly impacted both students and families. Consequently, it's more important than ever to establish partnerships with families and students as soon as possible, perhaps even before the school year actually starts. We strongly advise that educators personally reach out to students and families, either by phone or via technology, in the event that face-to-face meetings aren't possible. Conversation protocols are helpful to gather information about students and their academic, social, and emotional learning and needs. To the greatest extent possible, focus on the positive in these conversations with questions like, what can you tell me about your child that will help me to best meet his or her needs during this school year? What might make your child feel as comfortable as possible in school? What went well during remote learning at the end of the last school year? What challenges did you and your child experience during remote learning? What are your hopes and dreams for your child in the year ahead? What's the best way for us to stay in touch about your child? What's your preferred way of communicating with the school? As Karen Mapp says, 3 glows before a grow. Also, focus on equity regarding these family connections and conversations. It may be that differences between families' connections to their children's schools are more pronounced than ever after a quarter of remote learning. Some connections may be made easily. Other families may not be as responsive to efforts to connect with them. In such cases, extra effort may be required on the part of the teacher as well as from student services staff. I tried to contact them, but they didn't respond isn't okay. Do whatever it takes to connect positively with families. This resource, Cassell's Guide to Leveraging the Power of Social and Emotional Learning, offers helpful suggestions on creative ways to gather feedback that are inclusive of all students and families. In addition to phone calls, virtual meetings, or face-to-face conversations, these may include existing or new surveys and focus groups, in addition to other strategies. It also provides suggestions for leaders who are supporting and coaching teachers as they continue to take on new technologies, adjust to shifting work environments, address student concerns and challenges, and much more. There are a wide range of data available from remote learning. 2 sources of particular importance are remote learning surveys and remote curriculum gap analysis to study unfinished learning within grade levels and content areas. Ultimately, data from these sources can help to ensure that all students receive a full year of new grade level learning. This will mean prioritizing standards from last year's 4th quarter to be able to bridge gaps between last year and the current year's learning as seamlessly as possible. We don't want to have to teach the entire content of the previous year's 4th quarter in the 1st quarter of every year for the foreseeable future as a result of COVID-19. The University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Department of Socially Responsible Evaluation in Education has created surveys that districts and schools can use to measure student, educator, and family perceptions of distance and remote learning that they experienced at the end of the 2019-2020 school year. Districts can complete a form that allows them to distribute surveys to their stakeholders and receive weekly summaries of the responses. Student and family surveys also have Spanish, Chinese, and Hmong versions available. The use of data from these surveys will help district and school leaders to ensure that their stakeholders' voices are being heard as they plan for the upcoming school year.
Many teachers and other educators may be starting the 2021 school year concerned about student learning gaps that exist because of the transition to remote learning. In order to ensure that students have the essential knowledge and skills to be successful as they progress to the next grade level, it is recommended that educators engage in a remote learning gap analysis to identify areas of unfinished learning. Conducting a remote learning curriculum gap analysis involves 4 steps and is most effective when teachers work in their grade level teams or professional learning communities. First, teachers identify standards not taught and assessed during remote learning. Then, for each standard not taught and assessed, teachers describe any learning experiences the students received during the remote learning. Next, for each standard not taught and assessed, teachers determine if that standard is in fact essential knowledge. And in the final step, for each essential standard identified, teachers work with their colleagues at the next grade level to find lessons or units that allow for integration of this standard within the context of the next grade level's curriculum. Here's an example of a remote learning curriculum gap analysis template for the elementary grades. First grade is shown here, and as you can see, the first column identifies the grade level content and subject areas taught. The second column asks teachers to list the standards topics that had not been taught and assessed during remote learning in the spring of 2020. And in the third column, teachers describe any learning that students did receive for the standard. This is indicating the level of instruction provided during remote learning. It is critical to remember that once teachers complete the curriculum gap analysis, they must strategically determine if the unfinished learning is essential knowledge for students to be successful at the next grade level. It is important to start the new school year with the mindset that all students are capable of progressing to the next grade level and mastering the content. By focusing on essential knowledge, teachers can resist the urge to think students need to learn everything from the prior grade before taking on the next grade level's learning. Instead, they can target the highest leverage learning, develop interdisciplinary connections to accelerate learning, and make strategic instructional choices about which content to prioritize within the context of their current grade level. As challenging as the coming year may be, students deserve a full year of new learning at their grade level.
As we conclude this session, please keep in mind these words from Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry. Data that sit unused are no different from data that were never collected in the first place. While many of the data that we've used in the past aren't available to us at this time, there are different data to help guide teaching and learning in the coming school year. We've highlighted several in this session: screening data, curriculum gap analysis data, and social, emotional, and remote learning data from families and students. We do have data to guide our work. They're different, but they're powerful nonetheless. Thank you for joining our session. We look forward to seeing you in person very soon.